Hi, my name is Peter Moe and I'm from Tourism Ireland's Nordic office in Copenhagen. Today we will be talking about whiskey, but not just any whiskey, Teeling Whiskey. And we have the perfect person with us here today to enlighten us on Teeling Whiskey. James Kilgannon, whiskey expert and Distillery and Brand Coordinator at Teeling Distillery. Now James, you're very welcome to our show today. Would you mind telling our listeners what makes Irish whiskey different from other whiskies?
Hi, Peter. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. As you said, I'm James Kilgannon, so I am the Distillery and Brand Coordinator for Teeling Whiskey. So my job is to take care of the distillery, which is a lot of the company when you're a whiskey distillery, and then also the brand, which is not the whiskey, but is like what you think we are, essentially, and who we are.
It's also a major part of the company.
Yeah, it's also a major part of the company. So, yeah, I suppose it's a difficult question about like what's makes Irish whiskey kind of stand out or what makes it special. And I suppose I've kind of battled with that and I kind of learned through that over the last 6 years working in the industry. I think what makes Irish whiskey stand out is multiple of different factors. So one would be the rich heritage. So we would have a rich tradition of whiskey distilling and alcohol production in Ireland, whether it beer or with whiskey, of course. So going back a long, long time ago, even all the way back to the Celts. So rich history to draw from, to take inspiration, to be inspired from, kind of draw information from as well. But I think it's from a flavor perspective, what makes Irish whiskey stand out is the triple distillation that a lot of Irish whiskey distilleries implement in their production processes. It just brings out inherent fruitiness to Irish whiskey and inherent smoothness to it, which stands out comparable to kind of other global whiskey styles.
So what does triple distillation mean? Is it just that it's been through the process 3 times?
Yeah, so I suppose when you're making whiskey, the whole whiskey industry goes back to people having too much of something. So we had the agricultural revolution. People got really good at kind of rearing animals and growing grain, growing like barley in Ireland's case. In the Northern Hemisphere, you know, barley and rye go down a little bit more closer to the equator. You start getting a much better quality kind of wheat and corn. But we got too good at it. So we had too much grain. So what do you do with too much grain that you can't eat, that you can't sell, and it's starting to go off? Well, you ferment it and you make beer. So you make beer.
Definitely.
Every country in the world does this. So then what happens when you have too much beer and you can't sell it or you can't drink enough of it? You distill it. So you take the ancient technique of distillation, very similar to perfume production, same kind of technique,
Okay.
and you remove the water from the actual beer, concentrating the alcohol, concentrating the flavor, and then you put that into a cask and you get whiskey. So when you're going to put it into the cask, that distillation process, you have to do it in a pot. It's basically, people think of it as boiling, but it's not. It's more simmering. So you're kind of simmering it for about 8 hours. Every distillery does it differently. The alcohol comes up and you get a higher alcohol percentage. You go from just say 8% ABV to 27, just say. Then you put all of that into your next pot and you do the exact same step. And you go from 27 maybe up to 50, 60% alcohol by volume. And that would
Oh,
be
wow.
double distillation. So that's where you get your big, heavy barley flavors, chocolate, leather, tobacco, earthy flavors. In Ireland, we do it one more time. So that's where you take that spirit, put it into the next pot, and you triple distill it and you go all the way up to 82, 84% alcohol by volume. And that just cleans the spirit and allows a lot more kind of fruity, kind of exotic fruits, lovely smoothness to come through from the whiskey. So it's in the production process, is that kind of triple distillation.
So you mentioned 3 tastes before that arrived when you have this distillation process. What was it? Was fruitiness like exotic fruits? Did you mention that?
Yeah.
And was it sweetness?
Yeah, you get a smoothness from the whiskey.
Smoothness.
Yeah.
That was what it was. So what should you look out for in an Irish whiskey? Is that those tastes? What taste maybe exemplify an Irish whiskey? Or maybe a Teeling?
Yeah, I suppose it's looking at the global whiskey industry. We have like a number of large producers. So we of course have Kentucky of bourbon fame, or well, we can include in a lot of other states in that as well. But a huge amount of American whiskey, Canadian whiskey, and of course Scotch whiskey as well. Then we have Japan and other kind of emerging markets like Sweden and Denmark. Every country, we do the exact same scientific process. We take a grain that has sugar and we take the sugar out and the flavor out of that grain into a liquid. We add in some yeast and that eats the sugar, creates alcohol and flavor, and then we concentrate it down to increase the alcohol and concentrate the flavor. So, for example, you could make 30,000 liters of beer from your grain and your yeast, but once you've distilled it, you have maybe 2,000 liters of spirit, or how you say, new make spirit, what we call it. So every country kind of does the same technique, but we have different kind of nuances to our production. And in Ireland, we predominantly would triple distill. So when we're focusing on triple distillation, we're highlighting the barley characteristics. So we're bringing out the kind of rich
Okay.
biscuity nature, the oily nature, the spiciness that you get from barley. But then we also have the yeast. So we think of yeast as it raises bread and it also makes beer, which it does. But yeast also creates a lot of flavor. For us, for example, in Teeling, we use South African white wine yeast. So we don't use just distiller's yeast, which is kind of, would you say, the most efficient strain of yeast that just makes as much alcohol as possible. It's like the bodybuilder in the gym,
Yeah.
if you'd like. It's only focusing on making as much alcohol as possible. We use that to make alcohol, but then we also use the South African white wine yeast or Chardonnay yeast, which doesn't really make as much alcohol, but what it does, it brings in flavor. Focuses on bringing in
Okay.
lovely exotic fruits, pineapple, mango, orchard fruits. So if you were to compare that to the
That's
analogy,
fantastic.
yeah, if you were to compare that to the analogy in the gym, that would be, it wouldn't be the bodybuilder, it would be the person taking selfies in the mirror. It's more interested in the flavor side as opposed to the actual efficiency side. So at Teeling, we use that traditional triple distillation in Irish whiskey to focus in on that kind of exotic fruits. And you'll notice that it's a similar characteristic across a lot of Irish whiskies. It's fruit forward and just nice and smooth.
Fair enough. So a nice and smooth and fruity whiskey is what basically is a common denominator for a lot of Irish whiskies.
Yeah,
That's
I'd
fantastic.
say it would be the foundation of Irish whiskies. But what makes
Mm.
Irish whiskey so spectacular is I've worked in the industry for 6 years and I'm still finding products that blow me away. Like people using crazy casks and really obscure techniques and a lot of innovation and experimentation. You can get that foundation of kind of flavor, smooth and fruity in Irish whiskey, but you don't be shocked if you come across some very, very unusual flavors in there as well.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, can you tell me a bit about Teeling, as in the history of and?
Yeah, I suppose when you're looking at Irish whiskey, there's one brand which we won't talk about, but there's one brand that dominates the scene. It's like if you talk about Irish beer, there's one brand that
Mm.
everybody talks about. We're part of the new generation of Irish whiskey producers in Ireland. So, looking into the Irish whiskey industry, it's a little known fact that Ireland used to dominate the world in whiskey production during the 17th and 18th century. You would have had
Mm.
37 distilleries in Dublin where we're based, and you would have had, there's no real record, but a huge number of whiskey distilleries, upwards several hundred of them across the country, both illegal and legal distilleries, outputting about 60% of the entire global trade of whiskey. So huge amount in the 17th and 18th century. And we can actually trace all the way back in our family about 1782, a descendant called Walter Teeling, or an descendant, yeah, ancestor. I always get them mixed up. An ancestor, Walter Teeling, who would have distilled in Dublin all the way back to 1782. So there's a long route in the family in whiskey distilling, a lot of history there. But
Yeah.
where we kind of would have come in would have been with the opening of our distillery in Dublin in 2015. So the whole entire Irish whiskey industry unfortunately collapsed in the 19th century and the 20th century. So we went from couple of hundred distilleries to 2 distilleries operating in Ireland. Went from 60%
Okay.
to 2% of the world's supply. So a major collapse due to a number of reasons like independence, World War One, World War Two, prohibition, and just a lot of factors decimated.
Of course, yeah.
So the Teeling family came in the 1980s, opening up the Cooley Whiskey Distillery in County Louth. So that would have broken up the monopoly industry in Ireland with Bushmills and Jameson, and that was owned by John Teeling. So John Teeling and his sons Jack and Stephen ran that distillery until they sold it in 2008, and John went on and opened his own distillery, and Jack and Stephen, the owners, 2 brothers of the sons of John Teeling, would have opened the Teeling Whiskey Distillery in Dublin in 2015. So that became the first new distillery to open in Dublin in 125 years. So we just turned 7 recently, within this year.
Fair enough. That's kind of impressive. So there is definitely a lineage, a heritage to Teeling dating all the way back to the 1700s.
Yeah, we can trace it back, and where our distillery is in the center of Dublin. So we're in Newmarket Square. So we're just stone's throw away from, like, just say Guinness, St. Patrick's Cathedral, Stephen's Green, Trinity College, walking distance from everywhere in Dublin. And just 5 minutes down the road on a place called Marble Lane was where the earliest trace of whiskey distilling in the family can be based. So that is
Oh, wow.
it would have been beside the William Jameson Distillery, which is John Jameson's, of Jameson fame, brother, who would have had a distillery there back in the
Okay.
18th century.
Fair enough. But now you say you have a distillery and obviously you have tours. So what do you experience when you come and do a tour of the Teeling Distillery?
Our distilleries, when you're creating a whiskey brand, ultimately the product has to taste good. That's the number one priority, and that's our number one priority. Is if you can't stand behind the liquid, then you don't really have a brand. So we focus on the distillery foremost. That is our number one kind of concern, is make sure the distillery is running and it's creating award-winning world best liquid. That is our focus, and that comes across really well on the tour, because we're almost a distillery with a visitor center kind of tagged onto it. So it's kind of grown into its own beast. But when you come to the tour, you kind of start off and you learn about the history of Dublin distilling, so about Irish whiskey as well, to give a little bit of foundation. And we used to spend maybe 10-15 minutes talking about the ye old days of Irish whiskey and what came before. But now we've kind of shifted where we spend more time now on the actual distillery, because we can give the information of the past, but what's more important to us is the future. Where is Irish whiskey going? How it's going to develop? So we've redone our exhibition space so people get to learn about it in a better way, so that we can focus more time on the distillery. So once you leave our lovely air-conditioned exhibition space where you learn about the history from your tour guide and all the information's up on the wall, you go into a fully functioning distillery. It's hot, it's noisy, it smells like whatever we're making at the time, and we make a lot of different products. So one day it could smell like sweet fruits, the other day really malty, the other day smoky. It really depends on what we're doing.
Oh,
so the
that sounds
guide,
fun.
and it continuously changes. So we get a lot of repeat visitors, because it always is different of what we're doing. But you're on the distillery floor and you get to see straight and almost touch the actual equipment while they're actually working. Now, can't touch everything because some stuff is very, very hot, but you get to experience all, and to use the marketing lingo on this, the sights, the sounds, and the smells of a fully functioning distillery. So you will see our distillers working around. So if you're looking into,
so it's a very genuine experience.
yeah, it's not behind glass, protective glass things, and there's not like high vis jackets and like hard hats and all that. Like it's you're in the distillery. If you're looking into,
you're on the production floor.
Yeah, on the production floor. So if you're looking into the fermenter and you're getting the smell of all the wash that we're making, brewing away, and all the lovely aromas that are coming up, if one of our distillers needs to come and take a sample, he'll just go, "Sorry, do you mind? I need to get this sample." and you'll see them getting the sample, you see them working, it's a fully immersive experience. And that was really important to us, that if people don't want to see a kind of museum or a reconstruction or something, they want to see the real thing with all the kinks and blemishes, if you will.
Yeah, the true experience, the
Yeah.
authentic experience.
Yeah, so that's very much in the heart of what we do. It can be a bit noisy. In the summertime, it's very warm. In the wintertime, it's very nice because it's nice and warm in there. So it is a true experience.
Fair enough, fair enough. But it sounds fantastic though. But you mentioned that there would be, well, depending on which whiskey you're making each day, then what is the difference between the whiskeys or whiskey types, maybe?
Yeah, there's a lot of different styles of whiskey, and our ethos is to push the boundaries. So we don't want to make more the same. So we could go out and we could
Oh.
make a Jameson. We could make a carbon copy of Jameson, make it taste as much like that, and then sell it. We probably would sell a few bottles. We know how to make whiskey, but that's not ownable.
Hmm.
That's not something that we can say this is ours. That's not something that we can be like kind of really immerse ourselves in. So we focus on like innovation, experimentation. So we make a kind of core range of whiskey. So blended whiskey, which is malt and grain. We make a grain-based whiskey, so that would be corn. We also make a single malt whiskey, which is 100% malted barley. We also make a single pot still whiskey. So that is unmalted barley and malted barley. So that would be barley directly from the field. It hasn't been broken down to release the sugars. It's a very quintessential Irish style of whiskey, and it's almost like the cognac of Ireland, if you call it like that. It's a
Oh,
geographically protected term.
okay, so let me see if I get the difference here. Might be wrong now. So in the blended, you take the two different grain sorts and you mix them together after distillation.
Yes, so after
Oh,
distillation.
and
So,
the single pot, you take both grain sorts, put them together, ferment, and distill
yep.
all at once. Okay.
Yeah. And then we also make a peated malt as well, so a smoky style of whiskey. Plus, then we have a lot of experimental grains that we use, such as kind of crystal malt, chocolate malt, crystal rye, rye. More of the craft beer guys would know those type of terms. They haven't traditionally been used in whiskey, but we're using them just to see what flavor comes out of them, and it keeps us passionate about what we're doing. And then we'll use multiple different styles of yeast. We'll use both double and triple, predominantly triple distillation, but we do a little bit of double because it's nice to
Mhm.
have both options. And then
Yeah.
as it stands, as of a month ago, number could have gone up because it's always gone up, but we're in 150, well, over 150 varieties of casks. So from, as you'll know, Akavich. We're
Yeah.
also in rosé casks, Amberana cachaça casks, ginger beer casks, pineapple casks, cherry wood casks, Baltic porter casks. If you can think of a style of cask, we're probably in that.
I have to ask, how do you pair a cask to a distilled product? I'm
Um,
just terribly curious here.
we'd work with a lot of collaboration. So like we travel and we go to whiskey fairs all over the world. So whether or not it be in Singapore or the States or Australia or Germany or UK, we're always represented at trade shows, basically working with like-minded individuals. And they're like, they know what we do, we know what they do. We start sharing whiskeys, maybe have a drink afterwards, and then we start chatting about, hey, let's work with each other. So a good
Hmm.
example of that would be Plantation. So Alexander Gabriel from Maison Ferrand Cognac and Plantation Rum, we met him at a whiskey show. He took our casks to age his rum in, and we took his casks to age our whiskey in. So we have a plantation rum aged whiskey, and then we also have rum aged in Teeling whiskey barrels. So that relationship has grown to the extent that they got our peated single malt casks and aged their rum in it. So he didn't know what was going to happen when he got a peated Irish single malt cask and put his pineapple rum into it because no one's ever done it before. But through experience and also just drive. You want to do it because you have an idea, but you don't know which direction it's going to go. The same way when we took his plantation pineapple cask, they're not like the bourbon cask that everyone uses, where you know what's going to come of it. You go back to it every couple of months and you see what's happening. With these casks, you're going back weekly, saying where is it at, where is it at, how's it getting on, and seeing how it develops and seeing how it evolves. And that's what's fun for us in the production, and it's also fun for the consumer who comes to the distillery and gets to try these very unusual products.
I can imagine, because it must be so unique that you have all of these different types and
Yeah.
all of these different flavors. It sounds incredibly fun. But I mean, how long does it then need to be in a cask for it to be a whiskey?
So under Irish law, we have to be in the cask for 3 years. So before 3 years, you don't have whiskey. You have a putgene or a new make or a spirit. And some people do release that, and it can be very nice. But to call it whiskey or Irish whiskey, it has to be distilled in Ireland and it has to be aged in Ireland for a minimum of 3 years. Then
Okay.
after that, you can go all the way up to 30, 40 years, and it depends on the casks. So we have some casks that we would know would age for just say 5, 6 years. We know this spirit, our spirit, needs 5 to 6 years in this type of cask to get to here. Now, I always say 5 to 6 because we might have a hot summer, we might have a very hot winter. It depends on where the cask is in the warehouse. It depends on the cask. It depends on if it goes in at 67% or 69.9%. And there's a lot of variables. Every cask, every year is different. So it could be you do it by taste as opposed to
Okay.
this is the actual year that is good. And every cask is different. So we've had casks that we've put in for just say 3 months and they've just exploded with flavor, almost gone too heavy. So we have to take them out and put them into another cask to calm them down. And then we have other ones that you leave in and you're going, it's not picking it up, it's not picking it up, and you're kind of waiting. So you're unsure what will happen when you put it into these unusual casks. For the bourbon and sherry casks that we use a lot of, you kind of know how long it's going to take.
Then, like, what's the oldest cask you have? I guess which one has been? Yeah, what's the oldest whiskey you still have aging that hasn't been released? I guess.
I can tell you what, because these ones are very, very expensive. So if I told you the true answer, it would probably I'd be in trouble. But the oldest that we've released so far is 38 years old. So it's a single malt that's been aged in bourbon cask for 38 years. This comes from the Teeling family reserve of stock. So the Teeling
Mm.
family has a large reserve of stock that they've been collecting from other distilleries and from their own distillery with Cooley back in the day for a very, very long time. And the 38-year-old, which I was lucky enough to actually try, is bordering around, I think it was 41% alcohol by volume or maybe 42. And that's where the issue comes. So the older you go, the more of the more kind of age you get, but your alcohol percentage goes down. And the moment that alcohol percentage goes below 40%, it's not a whiskey.
Oh,
So
you really have to keep monitoring then.
you have to monitor it. So I'm not sure how much that cask was. Well, that bottle was. I'll have to check out that. See, we wouldn't deal with those quite a lot because
No, no, no. Obviously,
very, very small amount of casks get released of that.
fair enough. But it's good to know that the whiskey that you're smelling in the distillery when you come and visit, well, you'll have to wait a bit to
Yeah.
buy that. At minimum 3 years.
Yeah, so we actually have our own whiskey now from the distillery. So we're actually an interesting shift where we're completely shifting over to our full single pot still, peated, our peated malt, our single malt, and a lot of single casks. So what's amazing for people who are coming to the distillery is they get to see the whiskey being made and then try the exact whiskey that we're producing afterwards and tasting.
Oh.
So you can link back. You can go, oh, the smell that I smelt in the fermenters or the aromas I got off the stills or the casks, I'm getting that in this product right now. And our tour
That's
guides are
cool.
very good at linking that whole process together to kind of, we want to educate people essentially on like, so that they go to another distillery and say, hey, Teeling told me this and I know everything.
Well, that's always the goal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, but that's cool. So I like the fact that you can come in and you can kind of experience this, well, the smells beforehand, and then you might be lucky enough that you can then taste it and even get a bottle, for when you return.
Yeah.
Because obviously you can't get what's been produced that day, unless I guess they order ahead.
Yeah, no, you can't. Yeah,
No,
you'd have to, and I don't think we would take orders because that just gets very difficult. Yeah, it's a logistical nightmare.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So, what is your favorite whiskey then,
I suppose, like,
or what's your favorite type, if that's easier?
yeah, it's a difficult one because like I've obviously we get to taste a lot of our own, well, nearly all of our own products. I've probably tasted more stuff that hasn't been released than actually is released
Oh,
just from being up in the warehouse. But and we taste a lot of products from all over the world and meet a lot of people. The Irish whiskey industry and especially the global spirit industry is a very, very close knit community that we all know each other. We're all interlinked. We're all follow each other and kind of engage with each other all the time. But I suppose my favorite whiskey that we've released is the Wonders of Wood single pot still because it's just got a really nice story or a really nice kind of background to the actual whiskey. So obviously nobody else in Ireland made single pot still whiskey, which is the unmalted
yeah.
barley and malted barley. The only people who were making it were Middleton, which would be Jameson, Powers, Green Spot, Redbreast, Method of Madness, the IDL Irish distillers. So they were flying the single pot still flag solo for a very, very long time. And Dublin is the home of pot still whiskey. So when we set up our distillery, we wanted to really focus on making single pot still whiskey. So when we finally got our single pot still whiskey, we released it as a charity release initially, as a cask sold for charity. And then we released a core kind of release of it. And what was it was difficult. It was always going to be an uphill battle because people would pick up the very established Middleton pot still that the whole world only had as a base and would try ours and go, these aren't the same. And look kind of like be not inspired because obviously it'd be like if Coke was the only kind of cola drink in the world and you made a cola and they tried them together, they go, these aren't the same, and they discard yours and they just stay with what everybody knows.
Yeah.
Very difficult to kind of compete with that. So we kept doing it and kept talking about, well, no, they're not the same because we're not making a Middleton style pot still. What we're going to make is a Dublin Teeling style pot still. And we did a lot of education. So during the pandemic, we had 2 years of virtual tastings where we had a lot of pot still spirit. We had it on about 50 varieties of casks. So we just started selling tickets and going, okay, guys, for 40 quid, we'll send you 5 single pot stills in very, very weird casks. Here's our master distiller, Alex Chasko. Here's our global brand ambassador, Rob Caldwell. And let's sit on a Thursday evening for 2.5 hours and let's go through them and let's see what you think. Because we were like, we don't know, like, as we like them, but we taste whiskey every single day. Does the general consumer
Yeah.
whiskey fan like them? So we called it the Wonders of Wood because they're in very obscure casks like Amburana, in Mizunara, in Cherrywood, in Ash, very unusual casks.
Yeah.
So that released 2 single casks from 2 different types of whiskies, and then we did it again, and then we actually went and did it again after that as a global release called the Wonders of Wood, all from releasing our pot still from the distillery, doing a lot of virtual tastings and getting feedback almost as a focus group, and actually making friends with our customers that we still talk to
Oh,
this
lovely.
day. And we released the Wonders of Wood single pot still aged in Chinkapin Oak. 3 years after we released our first single pot still, and it won World's Best Single Pot Still at the World Whiskey Awards in 2022, this year in London. And it was just great to see that, like, we had 2 years of just virtual figuring it out, 1 year of releasing our first whiskey, and then it's back to World's Best Single Pot Still. And it was just a great kind of journey to get through that and kind of open up the world to this new style of single pot still.
Well, I mean, I definitely have to try a single pot still next time I'm in Dublin now.
Oh yeah, but it is in Denmark. I
There's
know for a fact it's in Denmark. I think it's
well, then I'll have to go to the shop then.
yeah.
But I still want to go to the distillery though and
Yeah.
experience it though, because I love the smells when you're in there. It's just so fantastic.
Oh, it is great, but the problem is like I'm still not immune to it. But it is quite funny when you go out and meet people afterwards and you just smell like barley and liquor, and you're like, I haven't been drinking. I just work in the distillery all day.
Fair enough. So be mindful that the smell that comes with it,
Yeah.
with everyone that's there. Do you have any Irish words or sayings you might share?
Irish is a very, very unusual language, but I suppose to link it into whiskey, like you also, like, obviously you have Sláinte, but I love the term Uisce beatha,
Uisce beatha.
because Uisce beatha is the Gaelic for whiskey. So it translates as water of life. But then when you go to Norway, Denmark, Sweden, you have akavit, which translates as well to water of life.
Water of life, yeah.
You also go down to France and you have eau de vie, which translates as water of life. So I find it fascinating that a lot of these three very, very distinct kind of, I would say, heritages or cultures. You have the Irish and Scottish, who both have their own version of Uisce beatha, who have their Celtic backgrounds going back thousands of years. Then you also have your kind of Mediterranean, kind of Latin-based areas, which go back again thousands of years with a water of life. And then you have your Nordic.
Well, the Nordic is Latin, so
yeah, but as well, going back even, because if you go to Old Norse and all that kind of stuff, you still have that water of life terminology coming into it. And I find that fascinating, that even though our cultures are so distinct and our products that we release, so to compare eau de vie in France being kind of grape-based distilled kind of product, or pomace-based distilled product, in akavit you have your potato-based infused with dill and caraway, well, predominantly potato, but a lot of other grains infused with aromatics. And then in Ireland you have your barley-based spirit distilled, all called the same thing. I think it just shows the history that the things that we're doing today in the alcohol industry, people have been doing for thousands of years. We think we're special because what we've done, but the person 1,000 years ago who used to make Uisce beatha thought they were special because they were doing the exact same science, just in their own way. I just find it fascinating that goes across.
Yeah, of course.
Uisce beatha.
Uisce beatha. I like that Uisce beatha. You can hear that. Well, you can hear how that has turned into whiskey.
Yes. Yeah. So Uisce means water. Uisce is water in Irish, and it's it would have gone to Uisce, and then it would have gone to Uisce, and then whiskey.
Whiskey, yeah. Because you can really hear it when you think, okay, Uisce beatha, and then the progression. It's not far fetched to actually hear that.
Yeah, and I suppose that comes from a lot of our towns in Ireland. Like I'm from Galway, which in Irish is Galway, so it's obvious when an English speaker hears Galway, they go, Galway. And Cork, you have Corkig, where people go, oh, Cork, Donegal, Donegal. There's a lot. The translations are quite simple.
Do you have any tips for anyone wanting to experience whiskey in Ireland?
Yeah, I suppose visiting a distillery definitely helps, and there's a lot of distilleries in Dublin. Ours is just the best. No, there's a lot of different distilleries in Ireland, and there's a lot in Dublin. So we're up at over 40 across the country, but then we have 5 in Dublin at the moment, all within walking distance of each other, and we all do very, very different things. And I think coming to learn about whiskey, going to a distillery is definitely your first port of call, because you really get the experience to production, like how it actually is made, and that kind of gives you an eye to, do I like a grain, do I like a malt, in the same way that when you go to a winery they show you how it's produced, and then you can figure out if you like a red or this grape type or white or rosé. They'll teach you to be able to make an informed decision. But there's a lot of good pubs around Ireland with a great whiskey selection, especially in Dublin, and I definitely recommend going out and asking the bartender what's their favorite, or what do you recommend. I was in this distillery earlier, what do you like? I like this one. Or what do you drink? And if you're in a group, all of you get something different. Don't all get the same thing, all get something different. Change. I know post COVID, I don't know if people do this, but yeah, if you know these people and you've family and friends, yeah, chop and change, try each other's one safely, and yeah, and like see what people think, because whiskey is definitely a social spirit. So very much people want to share a whiskey with someone else, and the pubs are a great way to do it. The bartenders want to hear your opinion on a whiskey, and why you want to hear their opinion. So definitely go to the distillery and then go out on the piss and try and remember what you drank.
Fair enough. That's a good tip to start with there. So finally, last question: where and how can our listeners get in contact to find out more about what you have on offer?
Yeah. So our global brand ambassador, Robert Caldwell, always on these things when he does podcasts and interviews and stuff like that, gives my email address to get in contact with him. So I should probably start giving his email address, but I won't do that because there's GDPR issues about that. But yeah, I'd say visit our distillery website. So we've two different websites. We have Teeling Whiskey. So Teeling Whiskey is the global brand that's distributed directly in 80 plus countries all around the world. It gives you background information on the actual whiskey and the distillery. But then we have teelingdistillery.com, which is the kind of focus for the distillery. So the cafe, the event spaces, the bar, the tour, all of the different experiences that we offer in the distillery, and then of course the whiskey and the online shop as well. So you can reach out to us on teelingdistillery.com. It's a brand new website, just got launched 2 weeks ago. So if there's any kinks or blemishes on it, please let us know. And don't review us publicly on it. Let us know first. No, it's all working fine. But there's a contact form there that you can send over a message. You can also book a tour on that. You can buy any Teeling whiskies and get them shipped out to you and anything like that. So Teeling Whiskey. And of course, follow us on social media. So we're on the TikToks now, the Facebooks, the LinkedIns, the Instagrams. I'm speaking like I'm a 60-year-old when I'm actually 30. But yeah, we're on all the social media platforms. So reach out to us there. Even if you send us a message, we're very good with responding kind of fairly quickly.
Perfect. That's fantastic. And all I have to say is thank you very much, James, for enlightening us on the wonders of whiskey and the wonders of Teeling.
Yeah, nice. No, it was great to have the opportunity. Like, our goal is we want to push Teeling whiskey forward, but we also just want to push Irish whiskey and Ireland forward. So thanks for giving us the opportunity.